Listeners, welcome back to the Magic Story Podcast, your guide to the planes, characters, and stories of Magic's multiverse. I'm your host, Harless.
And I'm your other co-host, Natalie. And it's here. It is finally here. Our return to the fan favorite plane of Lorwyn is just on the horizon. Lorwyn Eclipsed releases on January 23rd, 2026, and it's shaping up to be a celebration of everything players love about the plane. While our last episode looked to the past of this plane, today's episode is going to be looking to the future of Lorwyn.
And if we're going to be talking about Lorwyn Eclipsed, we figured we should bring on some experts on the plane. So we have two wonderful guests here today who helped shape the look and feel of this upcoming set. First up is our returning guest, Neale LaPlante Johnson, who was the narrative lead for Lorwyn Eclipsed, as well as for sets like Bloomburrow and Wilds of Eldraine, two of my favorites. Neale, how does it feel to be Magic's resident cottagecore narrative designer?
All right. Well, I'm actually not such a big fan of cottagecore and pastoral fantasy.
Gasp. Okay, continue.
Right. But as a set lead, as someone leading any kind of project here, my job is to make sure I understand why people like that and then execute on it so our fans will fall in love. At the same time, we're trying to make sure that even if you don't like pastoral fantasy or cottagecore, there's something in the set for you. For this set, maybe it's you don't like Lorwyn, but you love Shadowmoor. And that's the kind of dynamic that I'm trying to create.
Well, I have to say, for someone who isn't like the biggest fan of cottagecore, you've absolutely knocked it out of the park by creating some of my favorite sets, who is a huge fan of cottagecore. But to your point, like I've said this many times on the show, I love horror just as much as I love cottagecore. And I think this is such an awesome set because you get to marry like really creepy with really cute, and you don't have to compromise on either. So really excited that when I saw your name on this one.
I mean, I'm glad. I think there's a lot of people is they want the cozy, but it's a nice respite from the creepy, right? So you have these two dynamics that can play just like Lorwyn and Shadowmoor with one another.
I love it.
And it wouldn't be a return to Lorwyn without some amazing artwork. And Lorwyn Eclipse's stunning look was guided by art director Deborah Garcia. She's led the art direction on products like Wilds of Eldraine and Modern Horizons 3, and contributed to countless other corners of Magic. For someone who's brought so many different settings to life, it sounds like a dream to work on something like Lorwyn Eclipsed. So going into working on this set, Deborah, what was your relationship with the plane of Lorwyn?
So Lorwyn was only something that I was like really peripherally aware of. And once I knew I would be working on it, I just really immersed, myself with the set, getting to know it. And it clicked with me right away. It has so many cool, weird little guys. And I'm just a person who really enjoys weird little guys. And it really spoke to my childhood of dark 80s fantasy, films and media, and their aesthetic is a big touch point for me. Like it really informed my my sensibility and my love for puppets and things that have a very tactile feeling. I really wanted this direction of like imagining that each creature type could be something that you could build with your own hands, or that you could feel them like really, really tactile, like that they could be made of foam and like fluff and stone and clay. And I was really early on thinking about that texture.
I feel like one of the things that is so cool here, and with that the inspiration of that like dark 80s fantasy, is that it's not just that tactile piece is in the characters, it's kind of all around.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like something I also take from those inspirations is how the environment is very like has that staging of like, again, really tactile pieces. I was really enjoying this focus of like plants and how they could feel alive, like that if you were to talk to them, they would like giggle or like hiss or bite, and that they could be like have their own little hairstyles, like with fluff and like moving like they were, directed with wire. I wanted them to feel like their own little people.
I love that. That's really cool. That's exciting. Lorwyn Eclipsed is our first full-fledged return to the plane since Eventide back in 2008. Now it's getting the full contemporary set treatment. It's a lot of what folks loved about our first visit, but combined with additional touches to make it work as a Magic set.
We've got a lot to cover in today's episode, so we don't want to keep you waiting. Let's kick off our return to Lorwyn. I still can't believe I get to say that.
Join us as we head into the multiverse. So in our last episode, we covered how Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, they're sort of two sides of one coin. There's either one facing up or the other. But as we return to the plane, we're actually seeing more of a synthesis of the two. So can you both speak to that and how that's reflected in this new set?
So we had a choice when we were approaching this return to Lorwyn-Shadowmoor, namely that we could use that old model that you're describing where we flip back and forth from day, night, from Lorwyn-Shadowmoor, one at a time, or we could approach it in like a new way. So this is, both of them are present on the plane at the same time. And so as a consequence of Una's downfall, the entire plane kind of came together and like rushed and melted and didn't necessarily mix, but intermingled. I like to use the analogy of like a marble cake where you have chocolate and vanilla sort of mixing together, and they don't mix and form a brown, they stay separate.
Yeah. There's not like a secret third flavor that they come together to make. They're still chocolate and vanilla respectively, but you can get both in the same bite.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a third flavor, who knows?
Ooh.
But the goal is to keep them separated, right?
Yeah.
And so this was a bit of a risk given the fact that we have 4 sets. You mentioned Eventide, but we've Lorwyn, Morningtide, Shadowmoor, Eventide, 4 sets worth of content to kind of squeeze into one singular magic set. But that dynamic was also something that the original block had already sort of kind of run to death, right? We had seen a plane that had shifted back and forth and the consequences of that. So now we thought, what if we introduce something new? What if you knew that there was something out there, like a boundary of darkness that if you crossed it, you would forget yourself? Or maybe you just don't know what's out there, but it's sort of tempting and a little bit, I don't know, frightening at the same time. And so that's a sort of satisfying twist for both new players and for people who have been here for a long time. The new players will say, wow, that's an interesting dynamic. Experienced players will say, that's not the same one, but it's still posing some of the similar questions that made the original blocks so compelling.
So making the visuals of the two territories and transformations distinct, but also parallel, was a really important task that we set out for ourselves, from the beginning. And like Neale said, the two transformations are aware of each other for the first time. So even to them, these distinctions have to have meaning. Visually, I really wanted to pin down what made each half of the plane different from the other. So Lorwyn has always had its a strong visual identity. So my focus for the Lorwyn aspect of things stayed more on ways that I could extrapolate from what was already there or accentuate like the weirdness that was already present. Shadowmoor, I felt I could push even more. Something I really wanted to establish for Shadowmoor was a variety of different light sources that weren't always just reliant on moonlight. Things like wisps and, bioluminescent fungus and like moss and rocks, fires and like lanterns, like setting them up for like more dramatic lighting, cracks of wild magic in the ground, and like emphasis on like underlit light sources. So that was like a visual motif that I tried to keep consistent for the Shadowmoor side of things. And then I also established 2 major like consistent environmental motifs to help identify like not just what territory you're in, but also like to reflect the current crisis of the 2 planes being active at the same time. And we did that by adding an abnormal moon in the sky. You may notice that there is, along with the sun, the regular sun, there is like a smeared moon. And it's something you'll notice like in the background, like, keep a lookout for it. It's very intentional. And that, it's a clear indicator that something is off. And then on the Shadowmoor side of things, there is a perpetually burning eclipse sun that is always present in the sky, always accompanying the normal moon. They're both clear indicators that something is off. And another environmental motif that is present throughout both that is distinct is the standing stones. They each have their own distinct visual shape language. For Lorwyn, they're very bouncy. They're very round. The runes have a very like bulbous, appearance and texture. They're very prominent, and they just have like a friendly disposition. They're very welcoming. They float very charmingly. And then on the Shadowmoor side, the standing stones are much longer and they're more jagged. The runic shape language is closer to Pictish carvings and Pictish runes. So it has like a very like sharp, clear edge, very geometric. And while they're certainly not as friendly, I more so wanted them to appear, mysterious or dangerous rather than, evil. They're not evil. They're just the opposite of Lorwyn. They are cool. They're dangerous. Or they're trying to say it's dangerous here.
Yeah, they're giving you information in their own way that is helpful to where you are.
Yeah, they're friends too.
Yeah. I really love that. Something you both kind of spoke to is like, if I'm in one, I might be kind of afraid of going into the other, no matter which one that is, right? Like, it's obviously like easy for us to say like, oh, I'm in round, bubbly sunshine land. I don't want to go in the dark area. But I feel like also like you've created such a beautiful place in Shadowmoor where if that's what you're comfortable with and that's where you're happy, seeing those round, where everything is kind of like out there, you're like, something's still hiding, I know it, right? Like you still would be like a little cautious before you would want to tread across that line. And I also love what you said about if I cross over one way or the other, I'm going to forget who I am in this version. And I think that's just so fascinating because it doesn't matter which side you're on. That's who you are to you at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say the big conundrum of Lorwyn-Shadowmoor is this crisis of identity. It's not a matter of what is good and what is evil, but it is who are you and who are you beyond that boundary. And they are the same person, but they're not, right? You're transformed, but you're not different. It's your body, but reflected, just like a mirror.
It's a good analogy.
Something we had talked about from the very beginning was this idea that we didn't necessarily want Shadowmoor to just be the evil version of Lorwyn, that we wanted it to have its own aspirational qualities, its own coolness, and that it had its own, its mystery, its own enigma, and that it was a cool place to visit. Like you would have to be on your toes more, for sure, but it would be a fun place to go.
It's worth it. It's worth the risk.
Oh,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I
It's
feel
worth
like
the risk.
there's so many movies, books, all the media we all love to consume where the hero goes from the light side into the dark side. They go there for a reason, right? Like there's always something that pulls you there. And I love how, I think you said it's like, it's almost like a mystery that kind of pulls you in.
Yeah.
And I think that we're all different people. We all feel called to different things. And
what's an adventure without danger?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like Lorwyn would be way too bright for me. Like, personally, that's just too bright.
I just need the good lighting in Lorwyn, okay?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair. And I think this is a really fascinating way to recapture Lorwyn for a modern audience, right? Magic has exploded in popularity over the past few years, and the vast majority of our players, like myself included, weren't around to experience the original Lorwyn as it released.
Well, this set really presents a unique opportunity where you get to recreate everything magical about the original release, while also adding those elements that help it mesh with the rest of the Magic multiverse. So if you're looking at the set, you can engage with it as a seasoned Lorwyn fan or as someone totally new to the plane, exploring it with a fresh perspective. So how do you go about catering to those very different audiences?
So one of our goals when we were returning to the set is to capture what people loved originally. So that means not reinventing the wheel when it came to the creature types. For example, the elves in Lorwyn were always kind of evil and they killed a lot of boggarts. Our goal wasn't to kind of whitewash or sanitize that creature type, but instead to say, hey, that's an important part of why people loved Lorwyn as a setting. They loved saying, like, you flipped the script on its head. The elves are evil and they kill like these cute little boggarts now. That's a fun thing for players and they really enjoyed that. And for the same token, or by the same token, on the Shadowmoor side, we have these elves who are the inverse of them. So they're protecting beauty and they're essentially kind of saving things and cataloging them. That kind of dynamic, we wanted to make sure that players who've been playing Magic for the past 20-ish years, and you remember this original setting, still thought was exciting. And so we wanted to make sure that we were just keeping everything that people loved the same, while also, in terms of the visuals, kind of bringing consistency. So the things that you loved visually, we tried to make sure that that appeared every time rather than on one card in one set.
Yeah, visual consistency was very important. It was, forefront of my mind. In the original blocks, there are several like one-off designs for individual creatures that didn't always line up or go back to, their consistent visual motifs, especially in costuming. For a lot of the creature groups, I wanted to pin down a consistent visual look, a through line for each of them, where they all had a foundation as to like how their armor looked, like what materials they had access to, like what they could trade for, what they preferred. So Kithkin, for instance, also have a stronger consistency in their bronze designs, for their armor, for their artwork, as well as in their houses. Like we even put some of those Celtic designs like in the thatching for their roofs on their houses. And Lorwyn elves, for instance, have a hierarchy to how they wear their leaf leather. How it drapes is dependent on, how well regarded in their society that they are. And on the other side of that, Shadowmoor elves, their armor and their visuals is more connected to their function and like what they do in their society, how they serve, and focused on protection for how they travel, especially with how dangerous Shadowmoor environments are. I tried not to disregard any of the species detail that the original blocks established, but I did want to implement some new details that call back to the creative touchstones that I had for this return, that nod towards tactile puppetry and set-like environments. Boggarts, for instance, I really pushed for a more puppety feel for them, where they have their own strong visual identity using like fur and horns and stone, wood, clay. I wanted them to feel like you could build them with your hands. I actually made my own mask, my own
What?
boggart mask. at
Very
home.
cool.
And yeah, I'll share that with you when I finish because I've been working on it for a long time. I also made some choices like removing all human hair from all of the merfolk and having them only use fin shapes.
Mm.
While fairies, on the other hand, absolutely can and do have human-like hair, but they get more emphasis on the materials that they use for their clothing and their armor, like using like leaf leather, using bug carapace for armor, using amber as like a hard surface material.
That's so cool. And I remember talking to Zach Stella. We were on a panel together,
Yeah.
Neale, me, you, and Zach. I remember after the panel, he talked a lot about how these are little animals most of the time, especially thinking Mabel, the mouse, right? What materials does she actually have access to for her costuming in her house? And I remember asking Zach, okay, so if her roof is made of petals, does that mean she like changes them out every season because they kind of like start to deteriorate? And we had like a full conversation about that, and he knew the answer, right? And that's one of the things I love so much about our world building and art and magic is that just such a focus on that attention to detail. It's not just about what looks good. It's about, working together with Neale's team to understand what is around, what is available, what do they have access to, what do they not have access to that another group would, or to your point, like what are they allowed to wear in their station, and what are they not allowed to wear without, maybe offending a different type of elf or something. And I just love to see that in this set as well. I mean, we see it in every magic set, but to hear you talk about it, it's just so well thought out. And I just had to call attention to that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely something that all the art directors are thinking of. It's something that we consider for every set, whether it's new or whether it's returning to a well-known plane.
It's one of those things in the background that you might not notice.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, well, what's the climate here? And in that climate, what kind of things grow? And then do those things growing mean like, well, it's kind of warm and it's kind of briny. Do they eat like feta cheese on this plane?
Yeah.
And those are the kind
yeah.
of questions that kind of we think about, and then players sort of look past. But I think they look past it because it feels believable.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
understand the world and they can relate to it, and they don't question it, so they don't really notice it. And honestly, that's the best compliment you can get is like, oh, I didn't really notice that, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Just felt natural.
Yeah.
Now, while there are some new characters on the plane, we're still getting plenty of old favorites. At MagicCon Atlanta, we showed off some cards and some artwork of beloved Morrowind characters. I'm curious, were there any characters that you were particularly excited to bring back in this set?
So for the big picture, I really wanted to bring back a lot of these older characters and kind of give them a send-off to say like, hey, it's been almost 20 years. We did not forget, and we're giving them the kind of like farewell tour approach where we're saying, hey, do you remember Ashley, one of my favorite characters? Well, she's back and she's still alive and doing things. And I'll just speak to her because she's one of my favorite characters in that we saw her at the beginning of our, Lorwyn adventures. And by the end, she had kind of become somewhat of a villain. She had become the extinguisher and kind of got some heinous crimes, right? But that just means that she has a lot more stories to tell. So what does she feel after doing that? As a pilgrim, someone searching for knowledge, what's her journey going to be like afterwards? And I think that was super exciting. I also want to give a shout out to Reese, who should be dead if anybody's kind of keeping track of the life length of the now. But we did this cool thing where he had a death oath with Marilyn. So Marilyn's like, hey, if I ever transform into Una, you have to kill me. If I ever start showing signs, like we can't let her come back. And so Reese is like, okay, that's fine, but I can't live that long. And Marilyn's like, well, I'm basically the Archfey. You're going to live as long as I need you to fulfill this mission. And so that was a way to play into the kind of oaths are magic and these kind of ancient forms of wizardry, magic, and other stuff that feels right at home in a set so inspired by myth.
Yeah, it was really cool for me to be first introduced to these characters because I wasn't around for the original lore one. So like Aisling was kind of like a brand new character for me. And I love Aisling now. So it was like a really kind of exciting other side of it too. If you're a brand new player experiencing these characters for the first time, you kind of get it. You're like, oh wow, these characters are so cool.
Well, and so story, right? Like we get to step in and go, okay, I know there's a history here. I want to know more about that. Yeah, I love that when I find a character in a newer set that has been around for a while and I go like, okay, well, I'm going to need to do some research because this is a really cool character.
Yeah.
When it comes to returning characters, my favorite is Bridget. She's older but she's still, she's just as commanding a presence. She's just as powerful as of a warrior. She's still very respected, by her people. And again, she's an older Kifkin now. So her appearance is going to change. So Zoltan Boros redesigned her for her legendary cards, and he did such an amazing job at reinterpreting her design, updating her features to reflect her age, while still maintaining, her commanding presence, her strength, her leadership in both her Lorwyn transformation and her Shadowmoor transformation. She's cool either way. In a less like specific character, one of like creature types I'm really excited about that was redesigned are the changelings. They were redesigned by one of our concept artists for WotC, Jaehyun Chu, who always does incredible work. Oh my gosh, insanely talented, of course. And I feel like Jaehyun really understood like what I was going for, that sense of like puppetiness. And he did a really fantastic job giving them like a consistent look that can be reflected across their transformations. So their large yellow eyes and their fluff, which is a little bit more tentacle like than like true hair. Their jelly like appearance, their beakiness. One of the best things that like cracked me up during the concept push was that Jaehyun did a changeling transformation of a deer, and the changeling like face on a deer was so hilarious. It cracked me up so bad. I would look at it and then laugh and then look away and like wipe a tear and look at it again. And I was like, I love him. He is mine. That inside guy. And so I'm so excited about them, and I really hope that the fans enjoy their new design.
That's awesome. Well, how could you not love a changeling deer?
Right?
Yeah.
Subbing giant doe eyes, which are like obviously one of the most iconic things of deer, triangular changeling eyes, does sound a little unsettling. I was
He was. There was also one that was a tree,
yes, there was a tree.
changeling tree that was just as unsettling.
The concept was actually a changeling tree folk. So it wanted to like have its own face placement. So it got the changeling face and the changeling fluff for the leaves, and it had its own approximation of like legs, and it's just dopey.
We see some of these characters in their Lorwyn and Shadowmoor states either on double face cards or this cycle of commands that shows both sides of the character. And we also see that manifest in the landscape with a very neat piece of world building, the all new Eclipse realms.
Yeah, so Eclipse realms are an all new piece of world building and we introduced specifically for this set. And it's what happens when the light and shadow kind of collide together. I mean, we talked about this analogy of a marble cake, and sometimes chocolate and vanilla end up making a not chocolate and not vanilla. And while working on the set, there's this idea of chirality, which is if you have a mirror image like your hand, if you superimpose them, they're different. But in the mirror, they look identical. So it's sort of like you can't resolve it without going into maybe a fourth dimensional space or some kind of weird extra dimensional kind of realm. And that's what we created with this Eclipse realm. It's the question or the answer to the question of, well, if Lorwyn and Shadowmoor did combine, if we did have that crossing of these two rivers and they met somewhere, what does that look like? So you can see aspects of both of them, whether it's in the landscape or in the creatures that kind of end up trapped there and can't get out. So you can see the similarities, but you can also see that they've kind of evolved into a third state. So you're not necessarily sure if it's Lorwyn-Shadowmoor, if it's a different thing, if it's both, if it's neither. All those questions are kind of left up in the air and to interpretation.
A secret third thing that could be your true self or not like you at all.
Right. And so the term eclipse in this sense is kind of like this conjunction of two celestial bodies, whether it's a lunar or a solar eclipse. And the idea is they overlap and they create a new phenomenon. But this resolution of these two different selves doesn't mean that it's peaceful, like we just implied. When you stay there too long, you become what we call like a calciform creature, or you become calcified or calciform. And that means that you essentially become one with the landscape. And this is permanent. So you'll be forever trapped there. There's no resolution, no way out. So if you end up between these two boundaries and you're not in light and not in shadow, but you're in both, the world is kind of like, well, what do I do with you? And it's like, well, I don't want to deal with this. So now you're just a statue.
Oh, wow. And how does that look visually?
Visually, what we did in this case was we created a toolkit, something that could be applied to all creatures and was consistent throughout the environment. We didn't necessarily want to create like, how does this one creature look when they go into these realms? Because that would apply to, every creature type. And we wanted to minimize, how broad that could be, rather more like a guide to artists on how they could look. It's essentially a transformation where for each individual creature they are like suffused with a twilight glow. I wanted this to appear to be very unsettling. um it's not their natural form, it's quite dangerous. And it needed to look like both aspects of themselves were struggling against the other. So you'll see their Lorwyn side and their Shadowmoor side trying to overtake the other or exist at the same time. And the same is true of the environments. You'll see aspects of the environment elements trying to mirror each other while also trying to overtake the other or just collapsing in on itself. And I wanted that to evoke like this, again, unsettling, dangerous space. Like you really should not be here for very long.
That sounds so challenging. I'm very excited to see the interpretation of this. Like two things struggling against each other in one thing, right? It just sounds like a really fun challenge for our incredibly talented artists. I mean, we do work with the best of the best, so it's true.
Yeah, and a lot of this set involves folding in new bits of world building to the pieces of the original plane that players loved. And looking through what we've revealed so far of this set, it seems like you all emphasize kind of maintaining what players liked most about the past while carving out this new space for the future.
Yeah, to me, it really reads like you were taking the most beloved elements of the plane and then casting them within the mold of contemporary magic design, as opposed to just plain hits. Was that something you felt with the narrative design, Neil?
So from the narrative perspective, we kind of figured out that what players really enjoyed about our previous jaunts to Lorwyn Shadowmoor were the whimsy, the fun, the bizarre, the things that other magic planes can't deliver as well on, right? And so whatever our approach was, we had to distill down to those as being important. Whether you're a new player or a returning player, that was the emotional heart and soul of Lorwyn Shadowmoor. But at the same time, impossible to capture everything across, like I said, 4 sets into one. There's just not enough room, not enough cards to get a reference to everybody's favorite thing. The solution then was to say, hey, let me make this a set that's reintroducing this plan. Let's say, well, if you've never seen this or you've only seen it in your Commander games, what would I like you to think about this playing for the first time? What are the things that you need to know so that you're on the same level as everyone else and can still say, like, that wasn't just the same set we printed almost 20 years ago. It's a new set. A player who was 20 now was just a toddler when the first Lorwyn came out. So I think feel like we owed them the sort of set they could fall in love with, not a set that made them be like, well, is it for me? I have no connection with the original, and I don't know where my place is in the kind of Magic fandom and how I can be, a huge Lorwyn-Shadowmoor fan when I haven't experienced the original. So it's sort of reinventing that kind of wheel. And for those players who've been with us for, been around since 2007, I wanted to make sure that they didn't feel like we were not delivering on promises. We were not showing them characters like we mentioned earlier, or say, well, Una died, well, or was defeated at the very least. What happened? Like, what happens after that? So if we kind of said like, well, nothing happened, it keeps going back and forth, those players might be like, well, okay, but I played that set. I played that set in 2007. And so my job was to make sure that those players felt like we were delivering on a promise, and the players from, you know, just starting with Neale Kamigawa are like, well, I've heard a lot about this. I've seen a lot in my Commander game. What's it all about?
Yeah, you really let the events of past sets live on as history. And sometimes as those characters that continue aren't
Right. And that history informs our decisions today, just like the real world.
exactly.
But it also isn't something that needs to burden us. We can say history happened and what's the present? What is the future?
It feels like a lot of those problems really get solved in just the visual language of the set. And looking at some of the art that we've seen, a lot of it harkens back to like past pieces or styles from the very first visit to the plane. So, how did you go about making this brand new magic set feel like something straight out of the late 2000s in the best way possible? So, I was very keenly aware of how beloved the art for the original blocks are and have always been. And that had a lot to do with the artists who were originally part of those blocks that were on that roster. Many classic Magic artists had a hand in them, and with many of them being traditional artists, it really gave those original blocks a ton of texture and character. And it was a big focus of mine to make sure that we prioritize traditional work and artists that have worked with us for a long time and artists who we hadn't worked with for many years. I got to work with artists like Margaret Organ Keane and Heather Hudson and Alex Corley. And those were artists, again, that we had not worked with for years. And it was really, really exciting to pull them back on. And also working with greats that we have had a relationship with for a long time, traditional artists like Jesper Acing, Iris Kopke, and Sam Gay. Even for a smaller segment of the roster that is digital, I was specifically only looking for artists that had a strong traditional sensibility with their brushwork and their mark making. And when you say that, does that mean like artists who also work in traditional or who are well versed in making digital really feel traditional, or is it a combination of
It's the
both?
latter.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I can't say, whether they necessarily have a very strong traditional background, but they have a very traditional sensibility. They can make their work feel so painterly, and their work has such texture and movement that really feels like traditional brushwork. And I was really looking for artists who have that particular sensibility. So while the set is not 100% traditional, it is mostly traditional. And for that small block of digital artists, they were, directed to lean into that space of their own, mark making that like really lends itself well to the traditional element of this return.
That's awesome. Cool.
I also wanted to revisit some concepts that may have been a little inconsistent in the original blocks or pin down features, say, like for each species type. Uh, that would stay consistent for each species. So, for instance, I wanted the Kithkin to have a slightly more ursine appearance, with like emphasis on their round ears and their round eyes, like bigger, rounder eyes, and slightly longer torso and arms, just slightly, while preserving their sturdy, short stature. Um, I wanted space to be able to make individual expressions more malleable, especially for, the variety of artists that would be working on them, so that we could really get like as much character into each individual Kithkin as possible. Also, I think a love for Lorwyn is just as strong among the artists as it is among the fans. I have never seen personally so much enthusiasm from the artist pool uh, as like ever before on any set I've ever worked on. I was juggling artist interest with the realistic amount of work that I had to give. And it was really cool to see like the artists really, really cared and they were very excited about returning. It was super cool.
Well, there's like a passion for it, right? That goes,
Oh yeah,
we feel that way. Yeah.
right. I felt their enthusiasm and I definitely wanted to like just be a small part of that. Like, yes, absolutely.
Aw.
You can paint the flamekin of your dreams.
Yeah. And it's dream making
It-
for so many artists, which I think is so cool. Yeah.
I think it's so great that Magic connect not only our fans and everyone with this lore and world building in our heart, but our artists with worlds they want to work in.
Yeah.
That's just like the dream, really. There's no losers
Oh, no.
in any of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I walk around Art and Magic at MagicCon, and I'm like, wow, you have such a specific style. Oh, I recognize that piece from this world, and of course it belongs here. Like we have some artists where I'm like, every time I go somewhere dark, I'm like, I hope to see this artist, and I usually do. Or, like Evan Fong's a great example. Like anytime I see just like this bright swash of colors, I'm like, okay, where's Evan's piece? Right? Like, it's just really cool.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, I've seen a lot of art in Magic, and Lorwyn Eclipsed, I think, has my favorite pieces of all time, if not my favorite piece of all time. The players when they get their hands on it.
It's also just everyone's weird little guy deck is about to get way cooler. Yeah.
You little guys on top. Just
To that point, I mean, Harless and I talked about it in our last episode, but the visuals of Lorwyn and Shadowmoor are so distinct and unique to the plane, and they feel inextricably tied to the plane itself. And so it's great to see that this look is returning with Lorwyn Eclipsed. As Magic tries out so many new, distinct visual styles, you're creating something that's true to the past while also feeling fresh in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit weird. It looks a bit weird. It feels a little bit weird, but it all comes together in something that's just really beautifully weird, which I love.
So, Neale, Deborah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I've loved talking through how this set got made, both as professional and just as a fan of the work that you do.
And as we round out this episode, we always want to ask this question. Are there any elements of the set we didn't talk about, or just folks who worked on a set that you want to shout out or highlight? The microphone is yours.
I could go first. I would always want to shout out the artists, like the entire roster that worked on this, the malleable and patient folks who went through the process of getting like reestablished to work on Magic, who are still working on Magic now, as well as the team who did the concept push. That's our internal artists, Amanda Lee, Gray Highsmith, Jaehan Chu, Jose Vega, and the external concept artists that we brought on, Sergei Glushkov, or only Jesper Asing, Evan Fong, and Jorge Jacinto. They were fantastic. And I am super excited for people to see their designs, to see their work, and to see the world that they help build.
And so for my part, I'd love to, as always, thank my wonderful narrative team. Everybody there is just incredible, but specifically I want to shout out Emily Tang, who worked with me with the vision lead for this project. And it really couldn't have been made without her, as well as Amanda LaFranco, our new creative text game designer, who's doing all the incredible names and flavor text of all the cards that you've seen so far, if you've seen any of them, depending on when you're viewing this. And this is her first set, and she did an incredible job. And we made something I think is really special, will be loved by, hopefully everyone out there who's listening right now.
What a cool job, too. I feel like it's got to be one of those roles where you wake up in the night and you're like, I've got it. Oh,
Yeah, somebody comes up with, like, I don't know, Miss Bumbleflower.
oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, I also want to shout out this guy, the best creative partner you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
It's true.
I didn't think I was going to get too far away from I could hug you. So as we kind of exit, I wanted to show up two of our favorite pieces of art from the set. My personal favorite piece of art is Emptiness by Ryan Pankos. It is incredible, breathtaking, amazing, never been done before. I can't even have enough superlatives to describe it. And it's so haunting. It's my favorite piece of art in the set by a country mile. And this set is, as you said, loaded.
Yeah, and my personal favorite is Mutable Explorer by Wayne Reynolds. I gushed a lot about the changelings earlier, and I can't gush enough. This was one of the first changeling pieces that came in, and I was wild about it. I was like, look at that guy. Look at them. He is exactly what I was hoping for. Like Wayne knew exactly what I wanted and what I was really hoping to see. So it was like that like a really great first reward.
Absolutely. But I also feel like I would follow both these I'll call them both little guys for this purpose, but I would get in trouble real fast on this plane. I'd be like, "Where are we going?" And then with the, little guy and then bigger guy, I'd be like, "Whoa." And then I'm stuck.
Maybe they could be friends.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean,
You're trying to get me in trouble like
I'm not endorsing them. Right? I'm not implying that they are friends. Maybe acquaintances. Maybe they meet on weekends.
They have a commander mod.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. I mean, it's a little bit hard. The table's huge, but anyway.
Well, I know I can't wait to dive into everything Lorwyn Eclipsed. While debut is coming in January, we'll be kicking off the set stories in December. Return to the plane of light and shadow in this 7-episode story written by none other than Shannon McGuire. There will also be 3 side stories coming out at a later date, highlighting different elements of Lorwyn, written by 3 different authors.
The main story of Lorwyn Eclipsed kicks off December 8th, so keep an eye on Daily MTG for those episode drops. Lorwyn Eclipsed previews begin in January 2026, which is also when we'll be releasing the set's side stories, so you'll have more story content to kick off the year.
Thank you, listeners, and thank you, wonderful guests, for joining us. You've done a phenomenal job on this set, and I can't wait for more of it to be revealed and eventually get into the hands of players. Lorwyn Eclipse releases on January 23rd, 2026. You can pre-order the set's products now from your local game store, online retailers like Amazon, and elsewhere Magic products are sold.
We'll see you all when we venture out into Lorwyn Eclipsed story very, very soon. But until then, have a magical day.